The street was quiet, except for the low hum of traffic in the distance, the faint sound of a dog barking somewhere down the block. Maya Johnson walked slowly, her hand resting gently against her rounded belly, feeling the slight shift of her unborn baby inside her. 7 months pregnant, every step came with a mixture of joy and heaviness. She loved walking in the evenings. It was her way to breathe, to clear her mind after long hours of working from home, and to remind herself of the peace she was determined to hold on to before her child arrived. The neighborhood wasn't perfect, but she felt safe enough, or at least she wanted to believe she did. But on that night, she would learn how quickly peace could be broken. A police cruiser crept up behind her, headlights cutting through the dark. At first, she didn't pay it much mind. She thought maybe the officer was just patrolling. But then the car slowed and pulled up beside her, the window rolling down. The officer inside had a hard expression, the kind of face that already judged before a word was spoken. "Where are you headed this late?" he barked, his tone sharp and suspicious. Maya stopped, her heart thumping uneasily. "Just heading home," she said calmly, trying to avoid conflict. "I live right around the corner." The officer, a stocky white man with a shaved head and a badge that gleamed in the dim light, stepped out of the car. His eyes flicked to her belly, but then back up to her face, narrowing. "Got some ID on you?" Maya hesitated. She had her phone and keys, but she hadn't brought her wallet on the short walk. "No, officer," she admitted softly. "I'm just out for some air. I don't have my ID with me." His jaw tightened. "So you're out here, no ID, wandering around this neighborhood? That's suspicious." Her chest tightened. "Suspicious, sir. I live here. I can even point out my house to you." But he didn't listen. Instead, he stepped closer, puffing his chest like he had already decided she was guilty of something. The air shifted, heavy with hostility. Maya took a step back, lifting her hands in a defensive gesture. "Please," she said. "I'm pregnant. I don't want any trouble." That seemed to make him angrier. His lips curled. "Don't play that card with me. You people always got an excuse." Those words cut sharper than any blade. "You people." Maya's pulse raced. Her baby kicked suddenly, as if sensing the tension in her body. She forced herself to breathe, to stay calm, to avoid escalating the situation. But the officer leaned forward, sneering. "When I tell you to cooperate, you cooperate. You don't give me lip." "I'm not," she said quickly. Just before she could finish, he shoved her shoulder. Not hard enough to knock her over, but enough to rattle her. "Don't talk back," she gasped. "Please, I'm pregnant." And then, in one brutal second that changed everything, the officer kicked her. His boot connected with her side, and the shock of it ripped through her body. She staggered, clutching her belly, fear exploding inside her as pain shot across her ribs. Her knees buckled. She barely caught herself before collapsing to the pavement. Tears blurred her eyes as she cried out, "Why would you do that?" The officer's expression didn't soften. Instead, he looked almost satisfied, towering above her like he had proved some point. "Next time, learn to respect authority," he said coldly. Maya struggled to breathe, her arms wrapping protectively around her stomach. Every instinct screamed to shield her baby. Her mind raced. Was the baby okay? Was she bleeding? She pressed, trembling fingers against her side, praying there wasn't any serious harm. But beneath the fear, something else ignited. A fire, anger, deep and raw, surged in her chest. She wasn't just a pregnant black woman walking home. She wasn't just someone he could push around and treat like less than human. She wanted to scream at him to tell him exactly who she was, but she bit her tongue. Not yet. Timing was everything. From the corner of her eye, she saw neighbors peeking. Through windows, porch lights flicking on. Some had phones out, recording. The officer noticed too, and a flicker of unease crossed his face. He straightened, trying to appear composed. But his earlier aggression had already been captured. Maya's voice shook, but carried strength as she stood straighter, her hand still on her belly. "You don't know who you're messing with," she said softly, almost like a warning. The officer smirked. "Oh, I think I do. Just another mouthy woman who thinks the rules don't apply to her?" Her jaw tightened. She wanted to reveal everything in that moment, to see his face shatter. With realization, but she held back.
Oh.
She thought. Let him dig his own grave deeper. Blue and red lights flickered in the distance as another patrol car approached. Maya felt a strange calm settle over her as she braced herself. The pain in her side was real, the fear for her baby was raw, but so was her resolve. This wasn't the end of the story. This was just the beginning. Because the cop who had just kicked her brutal, her racist had no idea that she wasn't just a pregnant black woman walking home. She was Maya Johnson. And her husband was the police chief. And by the end of this night, this officer's career and his freedom would hang by a thread. Would you like me to expand part 2 next in the same 1,500-word detailed style? Carrying this tension into the reveal and confrontation, the sirens grew louder as another squad car pulled into the street, its lights flashing red and blue against the darkened houses. Neighbors stood on porches now, some whispering in disbelief, others holding their phones steady to capture what was unfolding. Maya stood there, still clutching her belly, her breathing shallow but measured, forcing herself not to crumble under the weight of what had just happened. The kick still throbbed through her ribs, and feared for her unborn child gnawed at the edges of her thoughts. But anger was the stronger current. Roaring in her chest, the first officer, his nameplate reading Thompson, shifted uneasily. His earlier confidence faltering as he realized he'd drawn an audience, he turned quickly toward the second cruiser as it pulled to a stop, trying to frame the situation before backup could ask questions. Got a suspect here refusing to cooperate, Thompson barked, gesturing at Maya like she was some criminal caught in the act. Possible trespassing, resisting instructions. Maya's lips parted, and for the first time, she felt her temper flicker dangerously close to the surface. He was lying. Boldly, shamelessly lying, as though the truth could be bent at his will. But she stayed silent for now. The second officer stepped out, a younger man with cautious eyes. He glanced between Thompson and Maya, his gaze lingering. On her rounded belly, she looks pregnant, man, he said quietly, his tone already uncertain. Pregnant or not? She was uncooperative, Thompson snapped. He squared his shoulders, towering over Maya again, as though trying to regain dominance. People like her are always looking to stir trouble. The phrase twisted like barbed wire in the air. Maya inhaled sharply, forcing down the fury that threatened to burst free. She met the younger officer's eyes and spoke with calm clarity. I was walking home. I told him I'd live here. I have done nothing wrong. She shifted, her hand resting protectively over her belly, and he kicked me hard, even after I said I was pregnant. The younger officer's face faltered, uncertainty. Cracking through his composure, he glanced nervously at the gathering neighbors, at the phones capturing every word. Thompson noticed the hesitation and immediately barked, Don't listen to her lies. I'll handle this. She's just trying to play victim. Maya's patience was a thin thread, but she held it together, reminding herself that her moment was coming. The truth was not something she needed to shout. It was something that would hit like a tidal wave when the time was right. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Slowly, carefully, she pulled it out, ignoring Thompson's glare. She dialed. With practiced speed, her voice steady as she pressed the phone to her ear. Hi, it's me. I need you here now. Her husband's voice on the other end was sharp and immediate. What's wrong, Maya? He kicked me, she said softly, loud enough for the officers and the neighbors to hear. Her words carried weight, slicing through the night. Officer, I told him I was pregnant, and he still kicked me. I'm standing here surrounded, and I need you. On the other end, there was a pause, a silence that carried more power than shouting ever could. Then her husband's tone dropped, low and lethal. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Maya hung up and slipped the phone back into her pocket, her eyes locked on Thompson's, unflinching. You're about to regret what you did, he sneered. Is that a threat? To promise, Maya whispered, her voice carrying the kind of certainty that made even the younger officers shift uneasily. The minutes ticked by, tense and heavy, until the low rumble of a familiar black SUV echoed down the street. It pulled up swiftly, parking just beyond the police cruisers. The door opened, and out stepped Chief David Johnson, towering. Broad-shouldered, his uniform crisp under the glow of the streetlights. His badge gleamed on his chest, and the authority in his presence was undeniable. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Neighbors whispered. Phones rose higher. Thompson's expression shifted from irritation to something close to dread, though he tried to mask it with a sneer. "Chief," the younger officer blurted, straightening quickly, his face paling. "Chief." Johnson's eyes swept the scene, landing first on his wife, his expression hardening when he saw her clutching her stomach. He moved to her side in 3 quick strides, his hand gentle as he touched her shoulder. "Maya," he said, his voice thick with both fear and fury. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" She nodded shakily. "I think the baby's okay. But he—" Her voice cracked with restrained emotion. "He kicked me." A silence fell like a hammer. Chief Johnson turned slowly, his gaze landing on Thompson. And for the first time that night, the officer's bravado faltered completely. The chief's eyes were sharp, unyielding, and filled with fire. "You kicked my wife?" The words came out low, deadly calm. Thompson swallowed hard, trying to recover his footing. "Sir, with all due respect," she was resisting instructions. "Following procedure." "Procedure." Chief Johnson's voice boomed, cutting him off. The air seemed to vibrate with his fury. "Procedure does not include assaulting a pregnant woman. Procedure does not include brutality and lies. You laid your hands, your bouton, a woman carrying a child. My child." Gasps rose again from the crowd. Phones captured every syllable. Thompson stammered, his arrogance slipping into panic. I didn't know she was—" "You didn't know?" the chief snapped. "She told you? She said it out loud and you still did it? Do you have any idea what kind of line you've crossed tonight?" Thompson's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The younger officer beside him stepped back, clearly wanting no part of the storm that had just descended. Maya stood taller now, the weight of her fear lifting as she leaned into her strength. "He didn't just cross a line," she said firmly, her voice echoing across the street. "He showed exactly what kind of man he is, and he thought no one would hold him accountable." She reached for her husband's hand, gripping it tightly. But he was wrong. Chief Johnson turned to the younger officer. "Take his weapon now." The younger man froze, eyes wide. "Sir, you heard me?" The chief barked. "This man is under investigation as of this moment. He assaulted a civilian, my wife. He is not fit to wear that badge another second." The younger officer hesitated, but then quickly stepped forward, unbuckling Thompson's holster and removing the weapon. Thompson's face burned red with humiliation and fury. "You can't do this," he hissed. "You can't strip me down like this in front of everyone." Chief Johnson leaned in close, his voice a quiet growl. "You have no idea what I can. You disgraced that badge the moment you chose hate over duty, and now you'll answer for it." The crowd erupted, cheers, shouts, some chanting justice, as phones continued recording. Maya stood at the center, steady and strong, the pain in her ribs overshadowed by the power of the truth finally revealed. But deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. The fight was only beginning. Thompson wasn't going to slip quietly into the night. Men like him rarely did. The real reckoning was still to come. Would you like me to now expand Part 3 in 1,500 words, showing Thompson's downfall in court, his humiliation, and the powerful ending where Maya's strength shines through? The courtroom was thick with tension, the kind of air that made every shuffle of paper and squeak of a chair sound louder than it should. Rows of benches filled with community members, reporters, activists, and off-duty officers, all gathered to watch the case unfold. At the center of it all sat Maya, her belly rounder now with the steady growth of the child she'd sworn to protect, and beside her was Chief Johnson, his hand clasped firmly over hers. Across the aisle, in a tailored suit that failed to hide, the sweat gathering at his temples, sat Officer Thompson. Gone was the swagger, gone was the sneering confidence. He shifted uncomfortably, his face pale, his jaw tight. For weeks he'd been suspended, the videos of his brutal acts spreading across news outlets and social media like wildfire. His name had become synonymous with disgrace, his face replayed over and over with the sickening motion of his boot striking Maya's side. The judge entered. an older black woman with piercing eyes that commanded silence. The room hushed instantly. As she took her seat, "Court is now in session," she announced. "We're here to begin proceedings in the case of the state versus Officer Daniel Thompson." The prosecution began with their opening statements, their words clear and unyielding. They painted the picture of that night with precision. The abuse of power, the racial undertones, the unnecessary force. They emphasized that Maya had not only identified herself as pregnant, but had begged for mercy, only to be treated with cruelty. When it was Thompson's lawyer's turn, the tone shifted. He stood tall, trying to twist the narrative into one of misunderstanding. Officer Thompson was acting in good faith, he argued, his voice smooth but hollow. It was dark. There was confusion. He did not know the woman before him was pregnant, nor that she was the wife of Chief Johnson. He reacted to what he believed was known compliance. Was it a mistake? Perhaps, but was it malicious? Absolutely not. The defense's words hung in the air, met with mutters and scoffs from the gallery. Maya remained silent, her fingers tracing over the edge of her notebook, where she had carefully written down every detail of that night. Every memory seared into her mind. Then it came time for testimony. The first witnesses were the neighbors, who had stood on their porches that night, phones in hand. One by one, they told the same story. Maya had identified herself. She had said she was pregnant, and Thompson had struck anyway. Videos were played on the court monitors, the grainy glow of cell phone footage showing the shocking truth. Gasps echoed as the kick replayed, the crowd in the video screaming in outrage. Maya could hardly watch it again. She closed her eyes, her hand instinctively covering her stomach, as she remembered the sickening jolt of pain. The terror that she might lose her child in that single moment, when it was her turn to take the stand. The courtroom fell into silence. So deep it felt like the world itself had paused. Maya rose slowly, each step measured, each breath steady, and swore her oath before sitting down. Her lawyer asked her gently, "Maya, can you tell the court what happened that night?" She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening but steady. "I was walking home," she began, her voice carrying through the chamber. "I wasn't doing anything wrong. I saw Officer Thompson, and I told him I lived there. He didn't believe me. He accused me of lying, of stirring trouble." She took a deep breath. "I told him I was pregnant. I told him I had a baby growing inside me. But he didn't care. He looked at me like I was less than human. And then," her voice cracked slightly, "he kicked me." The room was silent, all eyes locked on her. Even the judge leaned forward, her hands folded tightly. Maya steadied herself, her voice gaining strength. "In that moment, I thought I'd lost my baby. I thought my child's life had been ended before it could even begin, all because of his hate and his anger. And I thought no one would believe me. But I wasn't just a pregnant black woman walking home. I was his boss's wife." He had no idea. Gasps rippled again through the courtroom. Maya locked her gaze on Thompson. Eyes flickered. His jaw clenched, but he could not look at her for long. The defense cross-examined her, trying to chip away at her account. "You're sure you told him you were pregnant? Could it have been unclear in the chaos of the night?" Maya didn't flinch. "I told him clearly. Twice, and I was showing there was no mistaking it." Her calm certainty broke through every attempt to twist the truth. By the time she stepped down from the witness stand, the jury was leaning forward, their expressions grim and resolute. The climax of the trial came when Chief Johnson himself testified. He spoke not only as a police chief, but as a husband and father. His voice thundered through the courtroom as he described arriving on the scene. Seeing his wife clutching her belly, learning what had been done to her. "My badge means nothing. If it allows men like him to wear theirs," he declared, pointing at Thompson. "If an officer can abuse a pregnant woman, kick her, hurt her, endanger her child, and still claim it was a mistake, then we have no justice, no honor. He did not just attack my wife. He attacked the very idea of what our duty stands for." Courtroom erupted in murmurs of agreement, the judge pounding her gavel for silence. Finally, closing arguments were delivered, and the jury was dismissed to deliberate. Hours ticked by, The courthouse buzzed with anticipation, people pacing, whispering, waiting. Maya sat quietly with her husband, her hand resting protectively over her belly. Every moment was a reminder of what she was fighting for. Not just justice for herself, but a safer world for the child she carried. At last, the jury returned. The foreman stood, his voice steady as he read the verdict. On the charge of assault and battery, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of abuse of authority, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of misconduct in public office, we find the defendant guilty. The words hit like thunder. Gasps filled the room, followed by cheers, claps, and cries of relief. Maya felt tears stream down her cheeks, not of pain this time, but of triumph. The judge's sentence came swiftly. And without mercy, Thompson was stripped of his badge permanently, sentenced to prison time, barred from ever working in law enforcement again. His name, once spoken with authority, now carried the weight of disgrace. As he was led away in cuffs, his face pale and broken, he glanced once at Maya. She did not look away. She met his eyes, her own filled with a quiet strength that told him he had not won and never would. Reporters swarmed as Maya and Chief Johnson stepped outside the courthouse. Crowd cheering, chanting her name. Maya lifted her chin, her hand resting on her stomach, her other hand entwined with her husband's. She spoke to the microphones, her voice clear and powerful. This was never just about me. This was about every woman, every black mother, a child who deserves to grow up in a world where justice is not just a word but a promise. Tonight, we showed that no one, no matter their badge or their uniform, is above the law. The cheers rose louder, filling the streets with a roar of triumph. Months later, Maya stood in a quiet hospital room, holding her newborn daughter against her chest. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered to the tiny child, "You are why I fought. You are why I stood strong. And you will grow up in a world that knows your worth." Chief Johnson stood beside her, gazing at them both with pride and love. Outside their home, neighbors had placed a sign on the lawn, "Justice lives here." The story that began with hate had ended in triumph. Maya had turned her pain into power, her fear into fuel, and her voice into victory. And for the man who once believed his cruelty would go unpunished, his downfall served as a reminder to all. Hate has no place where justice stands. The story ends.